representatives in Congress, who 2/3 of them vote to amend the Constitution, and then 3/4 of the state legislatures have to approve it. So this is not something that was designed for the judiciary to just look at and say, "Oh, we're going to change this." We think the Second Amendment to the Constitution, for example, that gives people the right to keep and bear arms, we think that's archaic. That shouldn't be in the Constitution anymore. We're just going to take it out, and we're going to ignore it. That's not the way the system was set up. And by the way, the one troubling thing here is Kate Sunstein is one of the Obama czars, which, by the way, I think the appointment of the czars is unconstitutional, and I'm surprised nobody's challenged it. But he's one of the Obama czars, and he basically, when asked about the constitutionality of things like health care, he said that he thinks the Supreme Court is no longer relevant and shouldn't be allowed to decide what's constitutional and what's not. He thinks that instead that President Obama ought to be the final word on what is constitutional. Now, if that's a trial balloon and he's floating up there, that's very scary, because that indicates that you've got people in our government who basically have decided that the Constitution is no longer relevant, and they're going to start ignoring it. And there's a lot more coming down the pike through Congress that challenges our constitutional rights.
Well, that bill that you just mentioned, it's called the what? Sunshine Bill?
No, this was Kate Sunstein.
Right, Sunstein. Isn't that the limiting speech bill?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
I know there are bills in Congress right now that are designed to, for example, limit talk radio.
Right. Isn't that the Sunstein bill?
No. Actually, that bill has been introduced by Dick Durbin, and it's in the Senate right now. And basically, it reestablishes the fairness doctrine and gives Sunstein, who is the regulatory czar, and gives Mark Lloyd, who is the czar for the FCC, gives them the power to regulate talk radio and decide that there are too many conservatives on talk radio, there have to be more liberals, there have to be more left-wing programs, even though people don't listen to them, and that's why the stations don't carry them, because they can't make any money off of advertising. But this is all designed to try to limit the First Amendment rights to freedom of the press. And also Mark Lloyd, by the way, who, as I said, is the so-called diversity czar. Mark Lloyd has publicly stated that he thinks that we talk too much about First Amendment rights, and that the First Amendment right of free speech and freedom of the press is really no longer relevant. And he likes the way that Hugo Chavez does things in Venezuela when it comes to the press. In other words, he likes the idea of arresting people who disagree with the government. And this is the guy that is going to have more power under this bill that's being pushed by Dick Durbin in the Senate. And by the way, there's another bill that's been introduced to the Senate by Jay Rockefeller that's making its way through. And this bill basically allows President Obama to declare a crisis, doesn't define what a crisis is, but to declare a cybersecurity crisis and to take control of the Internet.
I saw that. It was absolutely frightening. But he's a Rockefeller. I would expect it. I would expect it. This does not shock me. But it is absolutely frightening. The thing is that when you speak to the number, it's kind of like a wheel and the spokes on the wheel, and you start to look at each spoke that's coming in very quickly of all the ways in which human freedoms are being removed or eroded. The government is going to be in our biological state of affairs, our financial state of affairs, and our speaking and writing state of affairs, and controlling all access to everything. As a constitutional attorney, what can we do and what should we do that would be effective at letting people know and understand that a great deal of people in this country will not be able to deal with this? Well,
there's several things. The first thing that needs to be done, and I said this when I initially started my little blog, and I started it a few months back, and I've already had 183,000 hits on it. And it's primarily dealing with the health care issue, but other constitutional issues. And I'm right now getting about 2,000 hits a day. people are looking at this and they're getting the word out to other people about what's really going on in this country, because it's very scary. And more people are getting involved. More and more people are contacting their members of Congress. And I think there's going to be a groundswell in a few months when we go to the polls, and I think that there's going to be a lot of changes made in Congress. I think a lot of people who voted for this unconstitutional health care bill are going to have to pay the piper, and they're going to get thrown out. That's one thing that can be done. Now, in the immediate future, I am currently working with a group called the U.S. Justice Foundation, which I had worked with when I was practicing law, actively practicing. They used to refer constitutional cases to me, and they handle constitutional issues. We're preparing a lawsuit against the health care bill to have it declared unconstitutional on a number of grounds. This is basically going to be, there are 14 states, of course, that have filed to declare it unconstitutional. They primarily are dealing with the 10th Amendment implications. This lawsuit I'm helping work on will be much broader. People need to support the groups that are going to be filing the lawsuits here, because it's going to be a very expensive and time-consuming process. So that's something that people can also do. But primarily, we just need to educate ourselves on what's going on and get the word out, and let people know about things like the bills that are pending in Congress to take over the Internet. Let them start contacting their representatives and put some pressure on them. And we need to encourage the main line of defense right now, and that is the states. We need to contact our state legislators and let them know that we will back them up when they do things like get the attorney, pass a law like Virginia has done, basically saying we're not going to abide by this. We're not going to force members of people in our state to buy health insurance. The federal government can't tell us to do that, and we're not going to go along with it.
What if the states are dependent on the federal government for subsidies? Then they're not going to be able to stand up from their point of view, are they?
Well, that's one of the things that the lawsuit filed by the states is about. Much of the subsidies, for example, for things like Medicaid, which is covered by the federal government at this point, is not going to be covered under this new bill. They are mandating that in a state like Florida, millions more people be put on Medicaid. People that can't afford health insurance or don't have health insurance will be put on Medicaid, and it's mandated that the states pick up the tab for this.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So you're talking a situation. Well, if you read the lawsuit that's been filed in the state of Florida, and it's the suit been filed by the 14 different attorney generals, they're saying this is going to bankrupt the states. We can't afford to do this. They're going to have to massively increase the taxes on individuals in their states in order to begin to pay for this, because the federal government is just saying we're dumping all of this on you. This is part of our program, and we're going to tell you what to do. So if the states think they're bad off, going to be bad off now, losing some subsidies, they are not really aware of what's coming down at them from the federal government.
Do you see the possibility of not only the 14 states you just mentioned, but other states coming in and saying, no, we will not participate in the terms and conditions of this health care bill?
Oh, I think it's coming. I think there's something like 38 states where they're considering bills in their state legislatures along these lines. So I think there are going to be a number of states. And I think as people and members of the state legislature start realizing the true implications of this, and the fact that it's going to bankrupt the states, it's going to take away individual freedoms, it's going to take away the rights of the states to regulate the healthcare industries in their states. When they realize the massive scope of what's happening here, I think more and more members of the state legislators are going to start getting involved. And if they don't, then again, people, when they go to the polls, need to hold them accountable just like they're going to hold members of Congress accountable.
I have a question about terms and conditions. When they think of health care reform, a lot of people want everybody to be able to get care if something happens to them. And a lot of good people cannot afford insurance. For my insurance alone, a month is $500 a month, and I'm well, okay? It's a lot. So a lot of people that are working, a lot of people who have worked but are now unemployed, who can't afford insurance, the terms and conditions